So I start, all right.
Okay, I'm Chris Kimmett. I work at Wesco Aircraft as the head of data architecture and business intelligence. And do you have any other questions in the intros? Yeah.
I'm Jordan Bohal. I'm the Vice President of Analytics for IH Mississippi Valley Credit Union, and I'm an adjunct professor for a Master's in Data Science program for Western Illinois University.
I'm Lance Gibbs, so co-founder of BP3, and definitely have a background in data and statistics and statistical analysis. So if we'll get into kind of the digital workforce bits, specifically, I thought one question that might be interesting is just trying to get a sense over the last day and a half now. We hear the word automation to the point now, and intelligent automation and whatnot, quite often. But just trying to get a sense of where it really fits in organizations. Obviously, with everybody here, you're here for a reason, right? There's something going on there. But one of the questions I had was, maybe Chris, start with you in your organization. Mm-hmm. Where does the term automation really fit? Is it a board level thing, or is it not quite board level or executive level or whatnot?
Kind of in my organization right now, it's at that board level. We're looking at what kind of efficiencies that we can get up, how we can kind of scale the organization as a whole, so that we can kind of meet those spikes. We can meet that new business without throwing headcount at it that may be temporary headcount in nature. So it's at the very top.
What kind of, maybe just for everybody's in your business, Wesco Aircraft, what is it? What do they really do?
So Wesco Aircraft, we're supply chain for the aircraft industry. So think about any kind of hardware parts that you see on any kind of an airplane. Boeing is major customers, all of the commercial airlines, and so we supply hardware parts. We also supply electronic harnesses and chemical products for anything kind of aerospace related. That includes space and rockets as well.
And that global distribution?
Yeah, global distribution.
Yeah. So in my organization, automation definitely sits at the exec level and senior leadership with the rest of the VPs. There's been a bit of pushback from folks, say our underwriters or any of our retail staff that are afraid of automation like you so often hear. And so right now it lives at more of the senior and exec level, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for us, the term automation is something that we've always used, right, as in our world of consulting and advisory and services. But it has the definition can vary, right?
Oh yeah.
Some of that's driven by technology. Some of that, can also be driven by particular just global efficiencies that start to happen in industry that we're working with. That even outsourcing, right, aspects of businesses or aspects of a supply chain, people would call that automation, right? For them, that is effectively what's happening.
Okay.
They put an input out there and get something back. So it's been an interesting, I think, ever-evolving definition. All right, so talking about kind of the digital workers, I love Beaker. All right, so this is a great euphemism, right? Got our data scientists and we got Beaker, others assistant. I'll let either one of you guys jump in on this. What do you think has been data's role as it has evolved? We talk a lot about analytics and insight. What has been that data's role in helping create this notion of the digital worker?
Yeah, I'll jump in. We're going to talk, I'm sure, a little bit about data literacy, digital literacy. And so for the digital worker, I see this issue as goes data literacy across most of our workforce. And so the rise of the digital worker, I can see as a direct response to folks not necessarily having the skill sets that we need to be building APIs or any sort of automated solution. Absolutely.
Yeah, and kind of on my side, we more or less have used data to kind of figure out our underlying processes in a lot of cases. Places where we thought we had processes before, we tried to roboticize, found out that they weren't really processes at the time. But we've used the data to kind of tell the story of where things are escaping, and what it kind of looks like, so that we can kind of help move kind of over to that bot world, with those learnings.
So in that kind of notion of the bot world, I know that's been kind of more of the analog for a digital worker as the non-human factor of it. But we also talk about having robotics as an example, but there's also going to be other technology, right? where it kind of sits alongside the human in getting work done.
Yeah.
Has data been, has data been a big driver of, you think, of this kind of evolution itself? Proliferation of it, democratization of data, as an example?
Yeah, I would say, it's kind of pushed us into an area, I guess, that we were kind of uncomfortable, with. We had our data was centralized in IT. We've been, slowly kind of pushing out to the masses, and helping them understand how their processes are working better, which kind of helps them look for new opportunities. And so it's been a big driver in that kind of aspect for us. And as we kind of move to where bots can really kind of sit, and kind of help augment some of that, some of those what we would call more of the, I'm trying to think of the word, more of the commodity type tasks, to kind of help them scale.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I see a lot of the automation pieces that we've been doing in my organization, and there was a talk that scared the crap out of me yesterday because it was so close to my heart, and it hurt. But nevertheless, where we are with our current automation journey, we've been getting rid of these silos and trying to make data available as much as possible and collect data from all these individual silos. And so with the bot revolution, again, from another presentation, I'm not sure how long the bots will actually last in industry, but nevertheless, it will help me push forward my automation initiatives so that people get more and more accustomed to the various automation techniques. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things I've seen a little bit of, and maybe it's just a function of the maturity of where the market is, with some of our clients and people that just, not even our clients, people I've run into and met with, other companies, and even under, I wouldn't say competitors to us, but maybe larger entities and kind of how they're looking at it. And one of the things is, even if they talk about automation and the notion of a digital worker at a senior level, one of the things they're also talking about is, okay, where's the obstructionism start to happen?
Yeah.
Right? Because back in the days when we talk about, hey, we're looking for process improvement, process, optimization initiatives, and we were going to sit down with the business. Hey, let's talk about this. The first thing they're doing is they're looking at you thinking, what about my job, right? And so coming at them and saying, this isn't about evaluating whether or not you can do your job. We're just looking for inefficiencies and where we could shore up. This becomes much more overt, right? Which is, no, actually, you are talking about my job or my team's job. And, and that's a big shift for people, right? And how they're going to actually start to adopt or even embrace this. How obstructionist might they be in doing it? It's going to be an interesting, I think, dynamic. I don't know, with your organization, the same people kind of, hey, this is the way we do things. We like it this way. We're not looking for bots running around.
We had a little bit of that, but at the end of the day, it wasn't scalable, so we had to kind of look for bots to try and augment some of that.
Yeah.
We can only throw headcount at it for so long, and a lot of those same tasks that they were trying to protect early on were the ones that they complained about the most as well.
Right.
So it was kind of a funny situation.
Brings us to our next kind of question here. Laura Beaker. So how will these digital workers, impact the day-to-day work of the human? It's as both an academic and an operator, in the business. How do you see it?
So I want to piggyback on the last question you asked, and with the pushback we're getting, of course, we have people who are taking chunks out of complete workflows, and that's all they know, right? And so when we have our process improvement coach come through, they're fine with that because she's a very nice person and she can approach them in the right sort of ways. But then when I come in on top of that and say, oh yeah, okay, all these process improvements we just made, we're gonna automate that with the bot, they're terrified. So to answer this question, I hear so many times at various conferences or in the various trade publications that, we'll just upskill our employees, right?
Right.
We'll upskill them. And with the rise of the low-code RPA solutions, for example, that's not a big gap to achieve. And so what I see happening is there'll be a bunch of people who will make that jump to be able to do the low-code scenarios and build their own bots that they'll have running in the playground with them. But at the end of the day, they'll have to have somebody, if it's a manual bot, to sit there and still click it to make it go. And they'll be able to work much more quickly, but it might be a same sort of skill set that we need.
Right.
Yeah, so there'll be a bit of a stratification. Yeah.
And kind of from our side of the house, what we were seeing, with a lot of the areas that we've already dug into, and I'm kind of primarily thinking order entry and, customer portal type interactions where we're having to scrape information out of customer portals and load orders into our system. A lot of that was being handled by a lot of our people that we would prefer to be CSRs and, customer touch points versus, doing manual kind of data push and pulls. And that was one of those tasks that they, that I kind of mentioned before that they didn't like. So it started out kind of as a, kind of iffy, a lot of obstruction, a lot of pushback on it. As we put in the first few use cases, they kind of saw the light and kind of moved in the right direction. It's kind of helped, kind of get those people in front of the customer a little bit more, better customer service kind of on our side. So it's been kind of a positive, journey so far.
Well, so we have a similar situation. We call them human APIs, for lack of a better term. What were the backgrounds of your CSR agents, and how did you get them over that hump to that next level?
A lot of the backgrounds of them, I mean, they were traditional CSRs, or they were, the account reps that we had kind of in place before. What ended up happening over the years was those kind of commodity tasks where they were kind of going out there and having to do a little bit more of the background work kind of grew and grew and grew. And so they ended up, what we hired them for was not what they typically were doing at the end of the day. So that job kind of changed over time. Now we're trying to kind of pull it back and, and make it scalable, quite frankly, because the more customers we bring on board and the more of these interactions that we have to have, the harder it will be for us to staff up for them. So it's kind of a revisit of their initial job. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So what are the skills needed to manage these digital workers? If you're in it's one thing when you're kind of leading it could be talking about CSR, so maybe it's a contact center, maybe there's 300 people in there. Let's say you don't need 300 people, right? The fact of the matter is it's a subset of that, or maybe you've got a group where that's like, 15 different groups of folks. There's maybe segregated by geography or by product lines or offerings or strategic accounts. And folks are very used to that kind of interaction, about how you manage that. But what kind of skills are needed when maybe half of that workforce really is digital bots? How do you take a CSR manager, and what do they need to have?
So when I teach at the university, it always astounds me that my students aren't what I would consider digitally literate, just as much as my employees aren't. And these are people trying to become data scientists, right? And why don't I consider them literate, or why don't I think that they could actually manage digital workers? It's because they lack a very, very basic skill set, critical thinking, creative thinking, right? Just something like, it sounds so simple. Who called us digital elites yesterday, maybe? We're all elites.
Craig, yeah.
Craig called us digital elites, so we're awesome. But at the end of the day, we're not great at critically thinking, and we're not great at logical thinking and reasoning, and we're not great at seeing entire workflows from beginning to end of process. And so these three areas, I think, are absolutely necessary to manage our digital workforce.
Are they going to get that in the world of academia? Is that going to have to be something homegrown organizations?
Yeah, definitely in organizations. Organizations have to really ramp up what they mean by critical thinking. And so it's kind of, you'll think this is kind of dirty, but my background's philosophy, not CS or engineering, like I'm guessing most of you. And so I see the organization being responsible, if they want to manage their workforce and not really lose headcount as much as people doomsday say it will, they'll have to really focus on that.
Yeah, and kind of whenever I look at this, I kind of immediately, I guess the data literacy, kind of side pops in my head. So maybe jump in, a little bit forward, but just knowing how, what their data is telling them to. I'm thinking once we move into the cognitive use of, bots and other things, they're going to have to know how to, kind of to read, to interact, and to kind of argue with that data. We're going to be throwing all kinds of different, information points at them that they're going to need to know how to interpret and make use of them. Learn how to do that storytelling so that they can bring it to the business and, kind of convince people, this is the way that we need to go. So there's just a broad, just better understanding of the data, and it seems like, over the years we've kind of, taken a step back, kind of like you allude to, and I think the quicker that we adopt technology, it kind of makes that cycle even worse. We have less and less understanding of what's kind of going on behind the scenes, in those aspects. The more and more things move, and the quicker that we jump around in technology.
I like the idea about the storyteller. What do you mean by that?
Just being able to, kind of take those data points and kind of paint the picture, and tell the story to the organization. What is this data kind of relating to us? It's one thing, and I see it all the time with a lot of our workers where they'll bring in, a giant spreadsheet in front of the CIO and plop it up there and go, here's your answer. And everyone
That
looks at it
works for some
confused.
people.
Yeah.
My CFO loves it.
Yeah.
Loves
Not a
it.
statistician, is he? I had a former, CIO that was a nuclear physicist, and that's what he loved. He thought that all reports should be a giant, spreadsheet. The bigger, the better. But being able to kind of, visually, kind of either storytell or something to get it to the audience so that they understand. What you're trying to convey to them. A lot of times, whenever you show spreadsheets in front of a lot of groups, the whole point of it's missed. They may make a decision that's, completely arbitrary to what you were trying to push for just due to the way that it was presented. So to get those workers, more and more used to telling the story, how to relate to their audience, how to get their points across.
Yeah. Seen it quite a bit. You have a organization you're working with, and they have ambitions are great, and their ambitions are high, and they realize, we're not exactly bringing them necessarily the keys, right? This kind of self-realization journey they go through. Like, okay, we can't just fix this in a vacuum. This is going to take me working with, if I'm policy servicing, it's going to take me working with the claims folks, the warranty folks, or maybe the sales people to really make this happen. We're going to have to, reach across the aisle, whatever euphemism you want to create bridges again over the silos, right? Over the gaps. And data was an important part of that. We all had a process map, right? And that was pretty quick. Everyone got the notion of, okay, here are the boxes, here are the participants and the lanes, and here are the systems we interact with. But what was frequently missing was the data, the shape of it all, right? The processes aren't two-dimensional. They're not just boxes and lines. There's a lot more to that, right? And data represents that. So how do you create a kind of a cohesive story? And it seemed like that started to gain, that's why I'm hitting on this, because you said maybe we've taken a step back. I agree. Because as that started to be much more talked about and discussed, how we need to bridge, the processes don't care about your org structure, they cut across it, end of story. How do we start creating these bridges? Then you've got a situation where there's a proliferation of technology in the world of SaaS, and logos popping out of WeWorks and every other thing every week, and it made it very easy for a particular business area to swipe a card or create a transaction where they can basically subordinate IT and their involvement, and they can kind of be more self-driven, and there is a lot of freedom in that. Mm-hmm. And to be able to say, oh, I control my own destiny, pressure's on me to be able to show X, Y, and Z, or maybe get more performance out of my group. Hey, there's a great new little SaaS application we can use, and it's low code or no code or whatever it is, or we just plug it in and boom, it gives us the answer. And even with some of the reporting, that was kind of the reason Tableau we started getting in existence to begin with, was the ad hoc report, ad hoc reporting and visualization. So that all sounds great. But what happens and what we've seen is as they've been able to be more in control of their destiny and maybe not rely as much on others, it's actually hardened the silos.
I was going to say it pushes the goal post back, right?
Back it does. So now you have to fight again to reestablish a level of relevance because, even they've relieved some of their own, pain points, through a very quick and dirty, vehicle. And maybe it's good enough, which I'm a huge fan of. Pragmatism should rule. But then what's happened is, okay, there's not a real compelling reason for me to talk to the left or to the right. Hey, that's their problem. And so we're back again, what it felt like, it took a long time to even get some of that progress made with it. And now I'm just wondering with some of the skills needed to manage digital workers or even having digital workers, it's going to be one of those things where, what does that do to the dynamic of an organization? And I don't think we know because we've not seen scale, right? We just haven't seen scale with any of this stuff just yet.
Let me ask you guys this. We've been playing around with the idea of like a VP of architecture or some sort of architectural manager, right? And their whole goal is to align each one of these pieces so that we don't recreate these silos once again. And align all of our IT, align all of our technology, every other process. Is that something that you've seen work or fail or?
I've seen mixed results with having kind of and I'm not sure it's the same role, but I have seen, where you've got, an IT organization. And of course, 85% or more of that IT's organization is not to innovate. It's not to go check out the new stuff. It's keep alive, right? Because all this stuff is great and wonderful until the systems go down. And it doesn't matter what you got. So that's where they spend their time. And of course, the business operations and other constituencies, right, within the organization, non-IT, have needs. And that conversation is always kind of met with some level of, friction. Where do they fit in priority and who can yell the loudest? I mean, this is literally how some of these things have gotten funded.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The squeaky wheel. I haven't seen squeaky wheels. I've seen boulders crashing through organizations to get what they needed. But then I've seen the introduction of this kind of business IT liaison, right? And their world, right, is not necessarily just, well, I'm an intermediary, so what's my value? It's, well, I'm trying to mediate, I'm trying to help codify what those needs are and where we can take this to the organization. And then that gets bubbled up to, the CIO, CFO, CXO, whatever it may be, where priorities are made. And I've seen that with mixed results. Sometimes I think it's still, there's a lot of culture to, kind of hash out with it. But I've seen good and bad with that. Do you have anything like that at West Coast?
We just recently, built that business liaison. Before then, it was a good portion of my BI team that was kind of filling in that slot just because we had that, frequent interaction, almost daily interaction with, all of the silos going across in order to get their reporting. But now we've kind of formally broken out in that business liaison group. What we're trying to push, because we were always good at kind of like, road mapping and having a strategy, is trying to kind of instill that into each one of the silos so that they kind of build that roadmap and strategy. Then we can kind of overlay, all of them and get that cohesive, and that way nobody's, kind of fighting and stepping on the other ones just for their, pet projects. It kind of goes into a larger, I guess, document that goes up to the ELT, and they're the ones that, kind of go through there, and each person gets two or three items of their choice, and then the other groups get what they need. So that's kind of how we're managing it right now. Still too early to kind of say if it was the right way to go or not, but it kind of seems to be getting some pretty good traction at the moment.
Anybody else out in their organizations have something similar to what Jordan's describing or what we're talking about right now? Just show of hands. Anybody have that kind of a intermediary in their operations? You do?
How's it working out?
Because I am new to the job as an interim director, so
Okay.
and we actually live off the business side.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is like the intake process, and working with the business is our job, and we work with IT, and once it's deployed, we're responsible for making sure that we can get the results.
Yeah.
Things
That's
like
a
that.
good,
Okay, so you're still right here.
Yeah.
but that's a good point. I mean, we pulled a lot of our liaison from the business side to kind of build that bridge. That way we weren't kind of going into that adversarial kind of, IT role, and just embedding ourselves in there. And that's been tremendously helpful, I thought.
Oh,
Did you hear it?
you go for it.
So she has a somewhat of an advocacy side. It doesn't report. It's not like truly in the middle, really on the business side, but kind of supports and advocates for the business with IT.
I report to the head of strategy.
The head of strategy. So it's part of your, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Since you started on this, I thought you could just kind of put it out there. Show of hands real quick before we get into this. Data literacy. Anyone know that term, heard that term? Show of hands. You can raise it. It's okay. Very many people in here, and you're not on camera. There you go.
Do you have a definition for it?
Okay.
Yeah, I found that there are over 100 different definitions for either data or digital literacy coming from some of the best journals in the world. So don't feel bad because nobody seems to know what's going on here.
How you view it, maybe start with that.
Yeah, to me, it's just the way that you read, kind of like I mentioned earlier, you read, interpret, kind of interact with the data, kind of argue, question with the data. Just kind of the overall, being deep enough into the data that you have a good comfort level with it.
Yeah, so I think data literacy is going to be what citizenship requires to be active and participate in the 21st century and beyond. However, there are, 52%, 51% of the world's population that doesn't have access to the internet or a computer. So that means 48 or 49% of us who do. Given that we don't really know what data literacy or digital literacy is at this moment, if we are moving down this hard automation track, this hard AI, ML, that kind of thing, then in order to make a living or to survive, we're all going to have to truly become data literate. So it's a massive issue. It's probably one of the biggest issues of this century.
Yeah, I think it's, and there's very tactical, very specific instances where, for instance, I talked earlier about the process maps, right? And, data being part of that. And people say, oh, I understand the data, cycle time, throughput, all that. I'm like, those are operational measures, I get it. But do you know the difference between continuous data, attribute data? Do you understand where these particular data chunks would live? Do you understand how to do stratification? Do you understand how to do disaggregation? Do you understand the difference between dealing with normal distributed data, non-normal distributed data? So when you're getting this data and you're trying to read and interpret what it means, right? These are some of the elements that, sure, fine, if you have a background in statistics or economics where this would all be played in, then you're going to get it. If you don't have that background, the organization, I think it's incumbent upon them to have to start doing that. But even before then, you're going back to academia, we still have folks coming through. Now, they're technically literate. They run rings around me. I've given up, by the way. I've completely checked out. I am the worst IT help desk my mother-in-law and his family could ever call on again. Back in the day, I was really, really good. No problem at all. Today, nope, not touching it. Windows 10, yeah, I got nothing. Not doing anything with it. And so there's enough movement out there now that, it's hard certainly for me, speaking for myself, to keep up with what's relevant out there, what's meaningful out there, and certainly, how data is being used. How ignorant are we about data? How ignorant are we about the intent and the use of data? Look at Cambridge Analytica. Look at Facebook. We were talking, I had a little lunch thing today. They literally took data that people were giving away because Facebook's free and everything's free. You don't read the end user agreement. And they knew the value of the data. And other companies knew how to deal with data. And they were able to effectively weaponize it. If you look at what they were able to do with it, it's effectively what they did. So data literacy, I think, across the board is important. And we talk about, in organizations today, risk and compliance and fraud and security, right? you're going to have to be able to kind of push that out into the organization. I don't think there is an app for security that's just going to handle all the woes, right? So by pushing that out, what are we going to need to teach?
Oh, sure. And some of the biggest companies right now are spending millions, tens of millions of dollars trying to get their employee base trained up. And, they're making success. People are making their certificates
Absolutely.
and that kind of thing. But it's not clear what they're actually training or how effective that's going to be for the future.
Yeah, Capital One, 100, was it 100
Yeah.
million of people affected?
Yeah.
That recent
I think
breach?
somewhere north of that, yeah.
Inside job.
Yeah, same with AT&T. Getting bribed to put malware in, right? You guys hear about that one? The AT&T problem? No, yeah, they were bribing some of or outside malicious actors were bribing some of the AT&T employees to put malware into their network. So if you got AT&T, you probably got malware. Congratulations.
Well, I was just thinking about making a switch anyway earlier. Going back to the rotary telephones, I think we still have a landline somewhere. All right, last question then. What do you guys think? What does harmony look like where we actually see kind of the marriage of, it's not just the human, the human-computer interface, right? That's been around forever up to a certain point. Now we're taking it a little bit further, right? Where there's going to be an even greater dependency and codependency, perhaps. What does harmony look like, in this world between the human and the machine?
Chris, you want to take it?
I'll let you jump at this one first. I'm still.
All right, yeah, so again, thinking about how automation, and people are afraid of automation because it's going to take their job. I don't think that's going to be the case. Instead, what I see as harmony is the bots or the various automation techniques, whatever technologies, are going to do all of that lugubrious stuff, all of that horrible work that nobody really wants to do, and allow the employees to do stuff that they enjoy. And so the harmony comes right when they stop doing the terrible stuff and start doing the stuff that's more enjoyable. Therefore, they'll have a better life life experience in their work life. Yeah.
I'd have to agree. I think that you get to that point where you go from fearing something to understand how, and I think control's a big function of this, right? Because this can certainly give you the perception of you do not have control, right, at a point of introduction, or maybe it's introduced wrong. But I think once you get past that, and there's a controlling element to it, and you can start leveraging that, then it's a much greater value, right? And you can rely on it, and then to what extent you can offer, right, organizationally, how much control can I start to provide back to the community who are going to be dealing with these bots and autonomous bots. I mean, it's not far-fetched for me to think and see probably pretty soon. I'm sure Microsoft is well on its way with Office 360. I mean, and I think even someone mentioned earlier, having the user having robots on their desktop effectively that they can then dispatch, right? They can feed them different things, and I want these robots to go do this thing for now, and hey, I'm going to change the robot's job later on. It's going to go do X, Y, and Z for me. Maybe that's workarounds to, constraints with systems. Maybe it has nothing to do with workarounds. Maybe it's something that, just gives them a little bit of extra flexibility or options out there. And I think one of the interesting things is we start talking about, almost like fractional minutes to hours of productivity, and you look at work groups in organizations. So you're almost going to have situations where across the board, you'll have workers who, maybe they didn't spend, have to spend 8 hours anymore doing that job. Maybe they freed up for 2 hours. But then, okay, well then how does that choppiness work? Because it's not like a finish line. So what is that going to do to the notion of like ideal manning, workload balancing, when some of the stuff can be much more real-time, autonomous to how they throttle their utilization, if you will, effectiveness.
Well, they'll start working like some of my devs do, and they'll run their code, and they'll just hop on Reddit. Done. Yeah. Figured it out.